evidence would suggest that presidential debates haven't had a whole lot of impact over the years in terms of deciding the outcome of a presidential election, and I think this year was probably one of those years that actually helps to prove the rule. Here you had a debate that everybody said was pretty dramatic and moved the needle and seemed to kind of change the trajectory of the race. And at the end of the day, it didn't turn out, I mean, it didn't help Mitt Romney win, and I think that suggests that not that they're not interesting, not that they're not important moments, and you know, combined with other things, it might have helped him win in the end, but it's not enough. You know, it doesn't change the you know, the fact that there's been a year's worth of an election, and that even after that October 3rd debate, in which the president, you know, seemed to do so poorly and Romney did so well, like, you still have another 6 weeks of campaigning or 5 weeks of campaigning to do, and so they're important. But I still think at the end of the day, you know, $1 billion spent on both sides on ads and on pretty extensive voter turnout operations probably still has more impact. I'm not so sure it's rapid as much as it is a kind of slow evolution, and I think it really has the most impact right now, or it seems to have the most impact right now for Republicans in terms of how they, you know, how they sort of campaign in the course of the next, you know, 4, 8, 12 years. And the reason is because the Republican coalition that they've been so successful with, mostly on the presidential level, so it's a little bit different on the House and Senate level, but on the presidential level, the electorate that they've been counting on has been one built around white voters, especially white men, and as a share of the electorate, white men are shrinking, so that, you know, 20 years ago, 8 out of every 10, about 80% of the voters that would cast elections in a presidential election were white men. Well, 8 out of 10, I guess, were white, and that the share of the electorate now that is white is like 72% and falling. So, you know, next presidential election it might be 70%, the following it might be 68 or 67. And so if that's what your electorate is built around, and that's where the most of your votes come from, to the extent that it's changing, you have to change with it. And so they have to figure out, you know, how to appeal to Hispanics and Asians and, you know, white working women and African Americans and the whole mix. Now, I will say there's one thing that I think is not talked about a lot, but is a demographic challenge for Democrats too, is that you've had 2 elections now where the share of the electorate among blacks and Hispanics, but especially African Americans, has been way up, has been when you've had a presidential candidate who's an African American. And so one thing I think the Democrats have to be careful of is that, you know, is that coalition going to exist when Barack Obama isn't at the top of the ticket? I mean, I think it's a big challenge. I think he proved to be a person who kind of was caught in, no matter which way he turned in the first term, in that if he tried, for a period he tried to dive deep and get into the nitty-gritty of negotiations with Congress, and, you know, he sort of came smack up against a Republican, you know, Congress that didn't want to give an inch, and so as a result he was criticized for being mired in, you know, getting sort of caught up in the nitty-gritty of Congress and not really sort of seeing the forest for the trees. He says now that he's going to not take that approach, that he's going to go out to the American public, he's going to make his case to the American people, and hope that that kind of outside pressure, you know, helps him to push an agenda through Congress. You know, maybe it'll work, but it's not clear, I think, yet whether he can marshal the same kind of, let me put it this way, he's been really good during campaigns, during the 2008 campaign and the 2012 campaign, in mobilizing this kind of Obama for America machine that gets people at rallies and gets people to turn out. It's less clear that he's been able to do that kind of outside the context of an election. And if you remember during the healthcare fight, you know, I had many people in Washington say, who were advocates of the healthcare bill and who were, you know, wanting it to pass, saying, how is it possible that, you know, we're going out to these town hall meetings and there's thousands or hundreds of people who are the anti-Obama Tea Party types, and there's none of the president's supporters. Where's that big kind of organizational muscle that the president showed during the campaign? He's not ever shown an ability to do that outside the context of the campaign without the kind of the threat, I guess, of an election, or the imperative of an election coming up. If he can do that, it might help. If not, I think gridlock is probably what we're going to see.